Okay, that's good. So I've started. So in this particular case, we have price here. We also have what? Price. So at price one, how much is firm A able to do to supply two? And how much is firm B able to supply one? So this plus this is the supply for the aggregate supply for the market. So when price is one, the market can supply what? Three. And when price is two, the market can supply what? Four here from A and two here from B. That is six. So which means that at this particular price, okay, the market can supply six. And at this particular price, the market can supply what? Three. So if you plot this particular curve, what you are seeing here is the market supply curve. And what you are seeing here is the individual supply curve for firm B. And what you are seeing here is also the individual supply curve for firm what? A. So which means that the market supply curve is the summation or the aggregation of what? Of all the supply conditions or of all the supply of the what of the market, okay, an aggregation of all the various supply conditions of each of the individual firms that we are looking at. Okay, now beyond the market supply, we are also talking about what factors actually drive how much this particular individual firms or the market is able to do what to supply. In other words, what are the key determinants? In other words, what are the key determinants of what? Of supply. What are the key determinants of what? Of supply. First, from what we have been talking so far, we've been mentioning about what? Price. We've been mentioning about price. So here, price of the good. So we are looking at the price of a good. And by the price of the good, the key as a factor of affecting supply, a key explanation is largely for you to fall on what? The law of what? Supply. The law of what? Supply. And you can see the law of supply is saying that when price is high, what will happen to quantity? Quantity will also what? Be high. Quantity supply will also be high, which means that at any point in time when there is an increment in prices of a particular good, suppliers are more than willing to increase what? Their supply. And when there is what? A reduction in what? In the price of a good, suppliers tend not to be happy. So they also do what? They also reduce the what? The quantity supply. They also reduce the quantity supply. So in this particular case, price is a critical factor affecting how much firms supply in the market, how much firms supply in the market. Now, the second one that we can look at as a key factor affecting, firms is the cost of production. Is the cost of production. It's the cost of production. So the cost of production is a very critical, factor that affects supply. And the cost of production, we are looking at what? Two things. Please note. And the cost of production, we are looking at what? Two things. Two factors affect the cost of production for firms. The first one we are looking at, we talk about issues on what? On taxes. We talk about issues on taxes. And then the second one, we also talking about issues on what? On subsidies. On subsidies. Now, for taxes, what do taxes do? When government imposes, a tax on a particular commodity, it increases the cost of what? Production. It increases the cost of production. So here I will make it COP, which is the cost of production. When government introduces a tax, it increases the cost of production. So in this particular case, if you have the effect of taxes, please note, once there is an introduction of a tax, the increase in tax, which I would call T, okay, the increase in tax will lead to increase in firms what? In firms cost of what? Production. It will lead to increase in firms cost of production. And once there is an increase in firms cost of production, what will happen to the amount that they are going to produce? Because they are now going to incur more costs than before to be able to produce a particular good. So once there is an increase in cost of production, overall, amount that they supply would also fall. So here would be decrease in what? In supply. So this is an introduction of what? Taxes. So when there is tax that is introduced or where there is an increase in what? In taxes. So in this case, maybe increase in taxes, or introduction of what? Of tax. So by increasing the tax, it will increase firms what? Cost of production. There is a clear link between the tax that is being imposed and the what? The supply. So if government wants to decrease the supply of a particular commodity or maybe the consumption of a particular commodity, government cannot, issue maybe a fiat to producers to stop production. One way to discourage the production of that particular good is to introduce what? Is to introduce taxes. Because once you introduce taxes, it will increase the what? It will increase the cost of what? Production. It will increase the cost of production. For these firms to do what? To reduce the production of that particular what? Of that particular good. Alternatively, when there is a decrease in tax, in this particular case, when there is a decrease in tax, you realize that as tax decreases, what will happen to cost of production? It means that firms will now have lower what? Cost of production because they don't have to pay much tax to the government. And that lower cost of production will translate into what? Increases in the amount of what? Increases in the amount of supply. So in this particular case, in the first one where we have an increase in tax, you will realize that there is actually a negative relationship. Between what? As you can see, there is a negative relationship between tax and what? And supply. There is a negative relationship between tax and supply. As you can see, as tax is increasing here, supply is what? Is falling. In this particular case, you can also see as tax is decreasing, supply is what? Is increasing. As supply is decreasing, supply is what? Is increasing, exhibiting that particular negative relationship between what? Between the tax and supply, between tax and supply. So please note, once there is an introduction of a tax in the demand, in the supply analysis, it directly affects what? The amount of quantities that affects the supply, okay, through the what? The cost of production, So later, once we are going to add some numerics to the analysis, we will be introducing the taxes to the analysis. And you should know that once there is an imposition of a tax or an increase in tax, it affects what? The supply. It affects the supply. This is something that we will be revisiting later. So apart from tax as a key factor affecting supply or through the cost of production, we also have what? We also have subsidies. So the second one that we can look at is what? Is the subsidies. The second one we can look at is the what? Is the subsidies. And by subsidies, we are basically looking at how much government is providing relief, basically how much government is providing relief or supporting the production of a particular commodity by providing them with some form of an incentive, and that particular incentive is done to incentivize producers to produce more of that particular commodity. Two things. So once there is an increase in what, so here we can also talk about an increase in subsidies, Once there is an increase in subsidy, yes?
Yeah, so we got a bit lost from decrease in tax.
Decrease in tax, okay. So
yes,
another thing.
From the,
okay, so here we're talking about the decrease in taxes. So you will see that once there is a decrease in tax, it affects the amount that is being what? That is being supplied, okay? Through its effect on tax, cost of production. So you will see that tax, please note, affects supply, okay, through its effects on the cost of production, which means that, please note, an introduction of tax this will be coming in the exam, so I'm spending some time on it, which means that an introduction of tax or imposition of tax, please note, first of all, affects the supply equation, or affects the supply. So let's say it affects the supply, which means that if you have a question or if you are faced with a problem in the demand and supply analysis where government is introducing an excess tax, okay, that particular excess tax should be affecting the supply. So your focus should not be on its effects on demand, unless we are talking about what? Income tax, because that income tax affects, the demand through the income as a determinant of what? Of demand. But here we are talking about the introduction of what? An excess tax or an indirect tax that you pay, that producers actually pay to the government for the production of a certain good and services. So the second one is beyond using taxes to affect the condition, the supply condition of firms. We can also use what is called the what is called. So this is the A part. We can also use the second part. Government can also use the second part, which is what? To provide subsidies. To provide subsidies. And these subsidies tend to be what? An incentive to the producers for them to do what? To produce more, largely to produce more of a good, So in this particular case, we are talking about subsidies. So if government wants to, government provides subsidies to maybe say farmers, okay, this particular subsidy will affect the supply through its effect on the what? On the cost of production. So once there is an increase in what? In subsidies, okay, once there's an increase in subsidies, let me do it this way, subsidies. So this is subsidies. This increase in subsidies will lead to, will decrease farmers' what? Cost of production. And the decrease in the cost of production will lead to increase in what? Will lead to increase in the amounts that they supply. Will lead to increase in the amount that they supply. Will lead to increase into the amount that you will good. He does that through provision of what? Through provision of what? Of subsidies. Because once you provide subsidies, it will decrease the cost. Once you provide subsidies, okay, it will decrease the cost of production, which will boost the production, or which will boost the production of that particular what? Commodity. So you will see that there is a positive relationship. So please note, there is a positive relationship between subsidies and what? And supply. Between subsidies and supply, there is a positive relationship between subsidies and supply. So as we can see, as supply is what? As subsidies are increasing, supply also tend to what? To increase, showing that positive relationship. So if government wants to increase supply, he can provide subsidies using the subsidies as the link, okay? And when you also look at it from the perspective of tax, if government wants to do what? To increase what? Supply of a particular good, to increase the supply of a particular good, government can also do that by doing what? By reducing taxes on that particular good, so that cost of production will fall for producers to produce what? More. So which means that the effect of a decrease in tax is the same as the effect of an increase in what? Of an increase in what? Subsidies. So please note, effects of decrease in tax and what? An increase in subsidies are what? Are the same. Are the same. And what is the effect? They all result in what? An increase in what? They all result in an increase in supply. And if government wants to discourage the production of a particular good, government can withdraw subsidies, or government can reduce subsidies, because once you reduce subsidies, it will increase cost of what? Production for firms. and this increase in cost of production will result in increasing, decreasing the supply, will result in decreasing the supply. So you should know the link. So in this particular case, we are talking about what? Decrease in government support to firms in the form of what? Subsidies. So decrease in subsidies. Now, the second part, or the third part that we are also going to look at as a key factor. Remember, we are talking about what factors affecting the supply. And we said the first factor is what? Price of a good. The second one, we are talking about what? Cost of production. And the third one, we are going to maybe see expectations similar to demand. So let's say the third factor is what? Is expectations. So the third factor, we are looking at what? Expectations. So the third factor, let's look at it from the perspective of expectations. And by expectations, we are looking at it from the perspective of what? Of firms. If firms expect, okay, if firms expect future prices, to do what? To increase, which means that future price will be higher than what? The current price, which means that from the law of demand, price now is low. From the law of supply, price now is low, which means for this particular firms, it is not going to be an incentive to supply more. So if there is an expectation that future prices would increase, then supply would what? Supply would fall. Current supply would fall, because you would not want to supply now. You would want to supply later. You want to supply later at a higher price. And if you also expect future prices to do what? To fall, which means that the current price is higher than the future price. So what will happen? Supply would will increase based on the law of supply, because at higher price, more is supplied, and at lower price, less is supplied. So if you expect future price to increase, you supply less now, so that you can have more to supply and make high profit. And if you expect future price to fall, you do what? You supply more now, because the current price will be more than the future price. The current price will be more than the future price. In this particular case, for instance, if you are expecting the higher, prices, the future price, okay, this is future price, would be more than the current price. This is current price, will be more than the current price. So as future price will be more than the current price, firms would have to wait to the future, okay, to supply more, which means that the current supply will be less because of the decrease in in the price. The same thing applies to the case if you are expecting future price to fall. If you are expecting future price to fall, which means that in this particular case, the future price, okay, the future price for this particular good, the future price for the good that you are looking at, the future price for the goods that you are looking at, okay, will be lower than the current price, will be lower than the current price. So as future price, this is future price, and this is the current price. So as future price will be lower than the current price, which means that the current price is higher than the future price. So what do? You tend to supply more of the goods, instead of rather waiting to supply in future, which the price will be will be lower, which the price will be lower. Now sometimes they say nature is also a factor affecting nature or weather. They say nature or weather. These are also factors affecting supply. For instance, during rainy season, people tend to supply or produce more of warm. During the cold season or rainy season, people tend to supply more of warm clothing and the rest. Okay, compared to when the weather is hot. Okay, another factor that we can also talk about. We can also be talking about the number of suppliers. The number of suppliers. in the market. If you have more suppliers, okay, if you have more suppliers, they tend to have more what supply. And if you have less number of what suppliers, then you have less supply, because collectively the quantities that you will be supplying or the supply of that particular good will be lower when you have fewer suppliers. But when you have many suppliers, supply tend to be what? To be very, very, very high. Of course, natural disasters are also, some key factors affecting our supply. So now, just to give you a summary, we talked about one. Just to give you a summary of what we've done so far. In terms of summary, we are looking at the determinants, and first we said we are looking at what price of the good as a factor. We are also looking at what the cost of production. We also talked about what the expectations also as a factor. And we also looked at what the weather or nature, when there's even the natural disaster or wherever, it affects the supply of a good. We also have the number of suppliers. The number of suppliers is also a key factor affecting the supply. We have 6 others. So the others will take care of all those factors that we have not listed, but are key in influencing the supply of a good, in influencing the supply of a good. Now, we are moving to the next session, and the next session we are basically talking about this change in supply. And let me start with the first one. We are doing change in, let's say, quantity supply and change in supply. So first, we are going to look at change in supply, in quantity supplied, and then the second one we are going to look at change in supply. Now, let's pick the first one. For the first one, we are talking about change in quantity supply. So I will just use this change in quantity supply. What does this change in quantity supply means? We are talking about changes in for change in quantity supply, we are talking about changes. So if I write this, it means change, okay? So here, point 4. So on point 4, we are talking about weather. Someone is asking about point 4. So point 4, we are talking about weather or nature. And then here, weather or nature, we are talking about maybe natural disaster. So natural disaster, for instance, when there is a natural disaster, firms lose a lot, and or the economy gets shaken, and what happens overall? The supply of a particular good will fall when there is a natural disaster. Okay, so when there is a natural disaster, supply tends to fall. Okay, relative to normal period. The second part is on the weather, and here for the weather, we are talking about when supply is dependent on the weather. And I said usually during rainy season or winter, people tend to supply more of warm clothing. People tend to supply more of warm clothing, like sweaters and the rest, jackets and the rest. So supply tend to be very high during rainy season or winter. Okay, and during dry season or summer, you don't get to see the supply of warm clothing. You don't get to see the supply of warm clothing, because in this particular weather, the weather is already hot. The weather is already hot. So supply of warm clothing and the rest, okay, during dry season or summer will fall. During dry season or summer will fall because of because of the weather. Okay. Now, when you look at the change in quantity supply, we are talking about changes in the quantity of
There's
quantities.
a
Yes.
question in the chat box.
Okay, let me see.
There's a question in the chat.
Yes, I think I've answered it. Or which one? A new question? Can we proceed? Okay. So if you have price here, you have what? Quantities here. The change in quantity supplied, okay, is driven by what? Changes in the price of the good. It's driven by changes in the price of what? Of the good. It's driven by changes in the price of the good. So diagrammatically, what you can see is for the quantity to change, which means that there should have been changes in what? In the price. So in this case, if you have something like this, okay, if you have something like this, we have this. Here is quantity. Okay. Here is what is price. Remember, we are talking about what? Supply. So we have this as our supply curve, which slopes upwards. Now, if price is here, let's say P1, how much will suppliers be willing to supply? Remember, they will be supplying less because price is lower. So this is quantity supplied. Now, if price increases to what? So they will be here. They will supply at this particular point. Now, if price increases to P2, we expect supply to also increase because it will provide an incentive for suppliers to do what? To increase what supply. So maybe say quantity will increase to what? Q2 because of the increase in what? In demand. Suppliers will be happy. They will be laughing because what? They have another incentive to supply more. So they will supply at what? At Q what? At Q3. So if you look at this, we have what? Point A, where price is P1, quantity is Q1. We're talking about what? Point B and then what? Point C. Now we are on point C because price is 3, P3, quantity is what? Q3. Now let's say all of a sudden there is decrease in prices. Once there is a decrease in price, we will no longer, suppliers will no longer be supplying Q3. They will reduce the supply to what? To Q2. They will reduce the supply to Q2 because price has fallen. So in this particular case, they will move, or we will move from C to what? We will move from C. We will move from C, okay, to B. Let's say price has further decreased again. We will move again from B to what? To A. Let's say, oh, something has happened and there is an increase in what price? From what? From P1 to P3. Quantity will increase right from A, Q1 to Q3, which means we will move from what? A to C. We will move from A to C because price has what? Has increased. So you will notice that the amount of quantities, okay, will change because prices are what are changing. So there's going to be a change in quantity supply, okay? There's a change in quantity supplied, change in quantity supplied as a result of changes in what? As a result of changes in price. What you are seeing here is for us to still be on the same supply curve, as you can see, SS, but the amount of quantities are what are changing because prices of that particular good is what is changing because prices is changing. So in this particular case, we are referring to this particular change, okay, as what? As change in what? In quantity supplied. And the change in quantity supplied, we are looking at what? The movement. Please note, similar to demand, for change in quantity supply, we are looking at movement along the same, this is there. We are looking at movement along the same supply curve. We are looking at movement along the same supply curve. And that particular movement along the same supply curve, okay, is caused by, so let's say cost. So I'm going to complete it with this, caused by changes in what? In price. Changes in price. Changes in price. Changes in price, which means that when you pick the determinants of demand, determinants of supply, we go back to the summary and we look at the determinants of what? We look at the determinants of supply. You will notice that the first one that we spoke about, which is the changes in what? Price, will be causing what is called the what? The changes in quantity supply. So which means that anytime there is a change in supply in price, it affects the quantity that is what? That is to be supplied. Now, the second one we are going to look at is the change in supply. These are two different things. So one, we are looking at what? Change in what? We are looking at change in, we are looking at change in what? Let me increase it. So we are looking at change in the, we are looking at change in, we are looking at change in what? In supply. And the second one, we are looking at what? Change in demand. The second one, we are looking at change in demand. So this is the second one. So the second one, we are looking at change in what? In demand. We are looking at change in demand. So, and change in supply. Now, for the change in supply, let me move to the next page so I can do it properly. So we are looking at change in supply as the second one. Now, for the change in supply, we're basically looking at what? The changes in the supply of a particular good as a result of some other factors that affect what? The supply beyond, our price, okay? Which means that for the change in supply, we are looking at what? All these particular factors that affect what? Supply. Which factors are we talking about? 1 up to 6. Remember, there are other factors that we do not know. So when there is change in price, it causes change in what? Quantity supplied. But when there is a change in what? Cost of production, when there's a change in your expectations, when there is a change in nature or weather, or when there is a change in the supply, the number of suppliers, or when there is a change in other factors, the quantity that we are looking at will not change, but the demand, the supply curve itself would have to change, okay? So now, the change in what? In supply, okay, is cost. Change in supply is caused by changes in all factors. Changes in all factors. So let me highlight this. Changes in all factors affecting supply. Apart from what? Apart from price. Apart from price. So which means that when there's a change, supply will change. When there is a change in expectations, supply will change. When there is a change in nature or weather, what will happen? Supply will change. When there is a change in what? The number of firms, number of producers, supply will change. Or better put, when there is a change in any other factor, in other factors affecting what? Supply. This supply curve would also what? Change. Diagrammatically, how do we portray this? Now, when you look at it diagrammatically, we are talking about supply curve here. This is quantity, and this is price. Now, this is the supply curve that we know. This is the supply curve that we know. This is the supply curve that we know. When there is a change in price, there would be movement here on this same supply curve, let's say S1. But when there is a change in maybe say cost of production, let's say change in cost of production, in this particular case, we will have a new supply curve, okay? So it will be either an increase in supply or a decrease in what? Supply. Let's say government is, there is an increase in the, there is a decrease in what? In the cost of production because government has decreased what? Taxes, okay? Government has decreased taxes. Remember, when we're talking about the factors affecting supply, and then we spoke about the, cost of production, we're talking about what? Taxes. So if there is a decrease in tax, what will happen to cost of production? It will fall, and supply will what? Would increase. So in this particular case, when government wants to increase the supply of a particular what good, he decreases the amount of what taxes to reduce the cost of production. In this case, the supply curve will at that particular price, at any price which is held constant, the supply would shift to either right or to the left, depending on whether there is an increase in supply or there is a decrease in supply. So let's say supply curve is increasing, okay, because of decrease in what? Cost of production. And what can cause a decrease in cost of production? Two things: decrease in taxes and what? Increase in subsidies. Remember, we mentioned this earlier. So once supply is going to increase, it means that we are going to leave our old supply curve, which is S1, to a new supply curve. Remember, this is an increase in supply. So if there is an increase in supply, the supply curve will have to shift to where? To the right. So you will have a new supply curve here. So here denotes an increase in what? In supply. So this is an increase in supply. So here we have increase in supply. Increase in what? In supply from S1 to S2. And what will cause that increase in what? In supply? Maybe there is decrease in what? In cost of what? Production. Okay, there is decrease in cost of production. Remember, if price is held constant, because we said price does not affect supply, but affects the quantity supplied. So if you just look at it from this particular perspective, let's say at this particular price, this is how much firms supply, that is the quantity. But you will realize that at that same price, there is some effect on cost of production that will decrease firms what cost burden in the production process. And by decreasing their cost burden, their overall production will fall. Okay, that will give them more, resources to produce more. So you realize that at that same price, okay, you will have a new supply curve here, which you will be willing to do what? To supply more. There is an increase in the supply, not because price has increased, okay, but because there is decrease in what? Say cost of production. So in this particular case, the entire demand curve, in this particular case, please note the entire demand curve, the entire supply curve will what? Will shift. Please note the entire supply curve will shift to a new supply curve, okay? So it will shift to the where? To the right if there is an increase in what? In supply. And if there is a decrease in supply, let's say government is introducing more taxes and then also withdrawing subsidies. So supply is expected to what? To fall. So if supply is expected to fall, or if supply falls, what will happen? The new supply curve will now shift from where? From right to what? To left, or it will shift what? Upwards. So in this case, we will have this as our new supply curve. We will have this as our new supply curve. Let's say this as our new supply curve. So this will be our new supply curve. So you realize that this supply curve is fallen, not because price has fallen, because at that same what price, suppliers are supplying maybe say Q0, because price hasn't changed, but because of what? Changes in the cost of what? Production. So in this particular case, we are saying that here for the red part, there is an increase in supply. And for this particular part, there is a what? There is a decrease in what? In supply. So supply increases by shifting downwards, okay? By shifting downwards, as you can see, from where? From left to right. And supply supply decreases by shifting what? Upwards from right to what? To left, as you can see. And this changes, okay, in the supply curve entails the entire shift, okay, of the supply curve through a different supply, a totally new supply curve altogether. But you realize that from the first one that we did, the quantity supplied, okay, we're looking at what? Movements along the same supply curve, along the same supply curve. But in this particular case, we are looking at what? The shift in the entire supply curve to a new supply curve. Now, when there is also a change in expectations, we expect similar thing to happen. When there is a change in number of what in the weather or nature, we expect this thing to happen. Either the supply curve to do what? To change by increasing or what? By increasing or by what? By decreasing. So you should know the difference between an increase in supply and an increase in what? And a decrease in what? Supply. When there's a change in the number of what? Production, number of firms or producers, supply curve will also what? Change. Which means that a key difference between change in what? Quantity supplied and changes in supply is what? Whilst the change in quantity supplied, okay, is entirely caused by changes in the price of the good. For changes in quantity supplied, it is driven by what? Change in any other factor affecting supply, apart from what? Apart from price. So if we listed 5 factors affecting what? Supply, and the first one is the price of the good, which means that when that price change, okay, when that price changes, we expect the quantity to change. But when there is a change in the other 4 factors, okay, apart from price, when there's a change in any of them, we expect, you know, this to happen. We expect the entire supply curve to do what? To change. Now, let's look at this. We've been talking about demand, and we've been talking about what? Supply factors. Now, let me just summarize this one too before we do this. So just to summarize this, we said we have supply, okay, and we are saying that supply is influenced factors, price. We are also talking about what? Expectations. We are also talking about, in fact, the price of the other substitute also affects the supply of what? Of the firm, yes, supply of a good, okay? Or the price of the other complement also affects the supply of a particular good. So if we have a number of factors affecting supply, which means that supply is dependent on some other factors, on some factors. Mathematically, instead of saying supply is dependent like this, or supply depends, supply is dependent on price of the good, cost of production, weather, nature, and the rest. Instead of listing all the factors affecting what? Supply, we can just put supply here. We can just write supply here, okay, as a function of, let's say, factors, and you know those factors. So if I write here, it means that supply is influenced by these factors, or supply is dependent on these factors. So which means that I can write my supply equation as supply here, okay? Supply here is a function. So what are the factors? Price of the good. We are also talking about what? The cost of production. We are also talking about what? Expectations. We are also talking about what? Weather, and the rest. So let's say we have this as the factors affecting what? Supply. So which means that going forward, we don't just have to list, the factors. All the things that we have done so far is just summarized in this particular equation. It's just summarized in this particular equation. In this particular case, what is the relationship between price and then supply? An increase in what? In price would increase what? Supply. And a decrease in price will decrease what? Supply, which means that we expect a positive relationship between what? Price and then what? Supply. In this particular case, instead of writing there is a positive relationship, I can just write this and put plus on top of what? P, which means that there is a positive relationship between price and price and supply. What about cost of production? Once there is increase in cost of production, supply will tend to do what? To fall. Supply will tend to fall. And once there is what? Decrease in cost of production, supply will tend to what? To increase. So which means there is a what? As you can see, there is a negative relationship between supply and then what? Cost of production. So in this case, I can just put 0. I can just put negative. Here, there is expectation. I have an expectation that future price, okay, this is price of the goods, this is future. I have expectation that future price will increase. What will happen to the supply now? I will supply less because price will be higher tomorrow. So there is a negative relationship between expectation and then what? And supply, especially when we expect future prices to what? To increase. So in this case, the effect here will be what? Will be negative. But if I expect future prices to do what? To fall. If I expect future prices to fall, what will happen to the supply now? What will happen to supply? I will supply more, okay, because future price will be what? Will be lower. So the current price will be higher than the future price. So I supply what? More. So you can see that negative, relationship, that negative relationship. In this particular case, we can as well just put here negative, this is positive, so something like greater than 0. Negative here will be less than 0, okay? Here also negative, so let's say less than what? Less than 0. So the weather would also, of course, depend on, whether we are in the winter or summer, rainy season or dry season. Now, similar to the demand, remember we also did demand where we talked about what? We did demand where we said demand is also a function of what? Price of a good. Where we said demand is a function of price of a good, our income, price of what? A substitute good. Price of what? A substitute good. So let's say A, this is not the good prices of other goods, okay? We are also talking about what? Expectations. Let's say let's say this one. So in this particular case, the price effect on demand will be what? Instead of being positive for the supply side, in demand, it is what? You realize that in demand curve, in the demand equation here will be what? Will be negative because there is a negative relationship between price and what? And demand. What about income? There is a positive relationship. What about price of other goods? It depends on which good that you are looking at. Please note, price of other goods depends on which good that you are looking at. And here, we are talking about what? Substitute and complements. We are talking about substitute and what? Complement. If it is substitute, an increase in the price of a substitute. If it is what? Substitute, an increase in the price of a substitute will an increase. So let's say sub price per good 1 has increased. Let's say if it increased, what will happen to the quantity demanded for good 2? The quantity demanded for good 2 will increase. Let's say there's an increase in Milo. The demand for what? For Bonvita will increase. So if you have prices of other good and the coefficient of the other good is positive, which means that the good in question we are looking at is what? Is supplement. The good in question we are looking at is what? Is supplement. So for supplements, the coefficient or the effect is what? The price effect is positive. But for complements, once there is an increase in the price, okay, of a complementary good, what will happen to the demand for the other good? The demand for the other good will fall, because once you buy this particular good, you have to good because they are jointly demanded, and you are buying that particular good at what? At a higher price. So you realize that the relationship between the price of a complementary good and the demand for the other complementary good is negative, because they go in opposite direction. So in this particular case, the price effect can also be what? Be negative, depending on whether it is, well, if the price can also be negative if the good that we are looking at is what? Complementary what? Good. So please note. So if I give you a question or equation and the coefficient for price is what? It's negative. Know that the type of good that we are talking about in that particular question is what? A complementary good. And if the coefficient is what? Is positive, know that the good that we are looking at is what? Is what? Substitute. Now, if you look at this things, let's say we have demand here. Let's say we have demand. Which slows downward from left to right. Of course, this is quantity. This is what? Price. We also have what? Supply. This is quantity. This is what? Price. This is supply. And you will see that there is a positive, relationship here. And here there is a negative what? Relationship between price and then what? Quantity. Positive relationship between price and what? And quantity. Now, when you bring these two together, it gives you an interesting, point that you can start your analysis with. And that point that you can start your analysis with gives you the idea of what is called the equilibrium. What is called the equilibrium? What is called the equilibrium? So we have our demand curve. We have our demand curve. We have our demand curve that slows downward from left to right, okay? And we have our what? Our supply curve that slopes upwards, okay? That slopes upward. You realize that there is a meeting point between demand and then what? And supply. And that particular point, demanders or individuals, okay, are happy. And that particular point, suppliers or firms are also what? Happy. This particular point that we are looking at, E, is called the equilibrium point. So E is called equilibrium point. It's called equilibrium point. Please note. This E is called equilibrium point. It's called equilibrium point. Equilibrium. That's the equilibrium point. So point E is called equilibrium point. You will notice that at that particular equilibrium point, at that particular equilibrium what? Point, okay, demand is equal to what? Supply. Which means that when there is an agreement, okay, between the amount demanded and the amount supplied, that particular agreement, or at that particular point, we say there is an equilibrium in the market. So there is equilibrium in the market if demand is equal to what? Supply. If demand is equal to what? Supply. So please note, at equilibrium, supply is the same thing as what? At demand, which we have denoted by what? By point what? By point E. Which means that at that particular equilibrium, two things would happen. So at E, two things would happen. One, you will have price, and you will also have what? Quantity. You will have price, and you will also have what? Quantity. Which means that at that equilibrium, there is something called equilibrium price. There is something called equilibrium price. And at that E, which is the equilibrium, there is also something called equilibrium what? Equilibrium quantity. There is something called equilibrium what? Quantity. Now, when you go back to this particular diagram that we are looking at E, you will notice that we have to the left, which is the price axis, and down there, we have the what? The quantity axis. So to be able to know the price at equilibrium, okay, or the price at which demand is equal to what? Supply, you would trace it to hit the what? The price axis. So here we are looking at what? Let's say PE. And this PE is the equilibrium what? Is the equilibrium price. So it is that price at which demand is equal to what? Supply. To get the equilibrium quantity, we do what? We trace it to hit the quantity axis. And this particular quantity axis is called the what? The equilibrium what? Quantity. So here we're talking about what? QE. And this QE is the equilibrium what? Quantity. This QE is the equilibrium quantity, which means that at equilibrium, demanders are willing to buy this particular commodity they are willing to buy this particular commodity at which price? Price PE. Suppliers are also happy to sell this particular commodity at which price? At price PE. Demanders are willing to take this number of commodities, which is what? QE. Suppliers are also willing to supply or to exchange how many? Q what? QE. Which means that at equilibrium, there is consensus, okay, between the demand side and then what? And the supply side. There is consensus between the demand side and the what? And the supply side. So if you have something like this, we have price, we have price, we have quantity demanded, we have quantity what? Supplied. In this particular case, if you have what I've just drawn is called the price and demand what? Schedule. Okay. If you have something like this, price is 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 5. At lower, because price 1 is lower than this. So at lower price, what will happen to demand? People will be demanding more, okay, because price is lower. Let's say they want to buy 10. Price has increased to 2, they reduce to 8. Price has increased to what? To 4, to 3, they reduce to 6. Price has increased to 4, they reduce to what? To 4. Price has increased to 5, let's say they reduce to what? To 2. But at that higher price, suppliers will be very happy to supply more. So maybe let's say suppliers are willing to supply 10. Price has fallen to 4. No, they will supply less because based on the law of supply, they will supply less. So 10, 8. Here it will be what? Let's say price has decreased again to 3. Then they also decrease supply. Price has decreased again to 2. Then they decrease what? Supply. Price is now 1. Then they are willing to supply 2. Or they are not even willing to supply. So in this particular case, you will realize that the only place where demand is equal to supply is which particular place? Is this particular place where the quantity or the demand here is equal to what? Supply. So at this particular place, there is what is called the what? The equilibrium. There is what is called the what? The equilibrium. So this particular place that we are looking at is the equilibrium. Is the equilibrium. This particular place that we are looking at is the equilibrium because demand is equal to what? Is equal to supply. When you transfer this diagrammatically, you will find this as the demand side. You will find this as the what? As the supply side. Basically, we're talking about, let's say, here being price 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And the quantity side, we're looking at what? The quantity side, we are looking at what? 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. Now, from the demand side, lower price, higher quantity. So we have from the demand side, lower price, if you can see, lower price, higher quantity. So this is demand. If it increases to 2, then they decrease the demand. Increases to 3, they decrease the demand. Increases to 4, they decrease the demand. Increases to 5, they decrease the demand. So this will give us the demand curve. This will give us the demand curve. Now, for the supply side, if you can see, price, more is what supplied, and at lower price, less is what is supplied. So from the supply side, at higher price, they supply more, so they will supply 10. Here, price has decreased to 4, then they also decrease the what? The supply. Price has decreased to 6, they decrease the supply. Price has decreased to what? 2, they decrease the supply. Price has decreased to 2, they decrease supply to 4. So they decrease supply to 4. Price has what? Decreased to, where is it? To 1, and they decrease it to 2. They decrease it to 2. So in this case, if you plot this, you will find the supply curve. So you can clearly see that we have actually represented this demand schedule, okay? This demand schedule in a graphical form, which shows that particular point of what? Equilibrium, as you can see. Is equal to what? Supply. So here, equilibrium price will be what? P3, as you can see. And equilibrium quantity will be what? Will be 6. Equilibrium quantity would be 6. So at this particular market, at this particular condition, supply, okay, or demand is equal to what? Supply at equilibrium. So in this particular case, the demanders are happy, suppliers are also what? Are also happy. Later, we will introduce the concept of market clearance to know when the market is cleared. Okay, when the market is cleared. Now let's look at a situation where you don't have this as, you know, as simple as this, which I know you will not have. In this particular situation, if we say this is our demand curve, okay? Remember we said we have demand, okay, as a function of so many factors. So let's say demand is a function of only price. Example, we are looking at only price as a factor affecting what? As a factor affecting demand. And we are also looking at the supply also being affected by what? By the price of a good. Now, from the supply side, what should be the sign here, the coefficient here? It should be what? Positive or negative? It should be positive because there is a positive relationship between supply and price. But from the demand side, here should be what? Should be negative. So what we have seen here, okay, are the factors affecting demand and supply. And in this case, we are looking at it from the which particular perspective? From the perspective of only what? Price as the key factor, as the only factor affecting demand, and as the only factor affecting what? Supply. But if we expand it to other factors, let's say from here, we have demand is a function of price and other factors, where this X here refers to other factors. Refers to other factors. In this particular case, we will also have here as what? Supply, which we are looking at it from what? Price as a factor, and let's say other factors. So maybe I will use maybe Z to differentiate it. So here, other factors affecting demand. And in this case, we are also looking at Z here as what? Other factors. Other factors affecting what? Affecting supply. Now, things that I've written here. Let's say this one and this one, or this one and this one. These are equations. These are equations. So please note, these are equations. Or these are equations or models. These are equations or models of demand and then what? And supply. So here will be demand equation. There will be demand equation. So please note this is equation. So this is demand equation. Here would be what? Supply equation. Here is also demand equation, and here is also what? Supply equation. Now, what I've done here is to write these particular equations, okay? To write these particular equations in an implicit form. So we have two types. We are looking at it, one, implicit equation, which means implicit supply equation or implicit what? Demand equation. The second one, we are looking at it from an explicit form. So we have explicit equation. So or model. So here is either model or equation. So the explicit one, we are looking at it, it can be explicit supply equation or explicit what? Demand equation. Now, if you write in an implicit form, it means that you are writing it in a compact form. You are writing it in a compact form. In a compact form, which means that, remember, this is a factor affecting demand, but you haven't opened it up. So it is an implicit model. For explicit model, these are equations that you open up, okay? That you open up, you write it in full. What I have here is a summarized version of the factors affecting demand and supply. So because it's a summarized model, it does not give the true picture of the key equation, okay, or the key effects. And because of that, it is an explicit equation, or it is written in a compact form. For instance, if you pick the first one, which is demand, okay, which is demand, and we said demand is a function of, let's say, price. This is an implicit equation, or this is written in compact form. To write it in an explicit form, you need to specify what is this particular relationship of price and then what? Demand. Let's say in an explicit form, so what we have here is implicit. In an explicit form, we will have demand here, okay? Let's say 10 minus maybe 2p. Please note, where p here is the price of the good. So what we have here is, we have now, written this implicit equation to say that the demand equation, okay, is 10 minus what? 2p. Remember, we are looking at the coefficient of what? P. Coefficient. We are looking at the coefficient of P, or coefficient of price. And what is that coefficient? It's here. The coefficient is the number attached to the value, or the number attached to the factor, or the number attached to something. So here, this number is what? -2. It is attached to price. And you will see clearly that price here effect is less than what? It's less than 0. You will see price here is less than 0, because price here, as you can see, is showing the negative relationship. So this is the demand equation, or the demand model, in an explicit form. So if I write an equation and I tell you to write it in an explicit form, it's basically for you to open it up and then attach the various sign of it. In this case, the coefficient of price in the demand equation is expected to be what? To be negative. So the coefficient of price should be what? Should be negative. Should be negative. That is for a normal good. We are looking at it from the perspective of a normal good. So it's negative. So this is the first one. Let's say we have another one. Let's say we have another one. Let's introduce what? Let's look at the what is the name? The other factor. Let's say we have demand is a function of what? Price of the good, income, and then what? Price of what? Other goods. This is a compact model, an implicit model of what? Determinants of demand. So to write it in an explicit form, we will then have demand is, so maybe we are just choosing arbitrary figures. The effect should be on the what? On the sign. In this case, let's say we have 5. Here, what will be the coefficient? It will be negative. So let's say minus maybe 3p x. And income, what should be the sign? It should be positive. Plus. So let's say 2y. What about prices of other goods? It can be positive or it can be negative. So if I write an equation like this and I say this one minus maybe 0.5 PA, where, please note, where PX is price of the good, where PX is price of the good, P what? Y is income. And then the last one, PA, would be what? Price of other goods. Price of other good. Price of the other good. In this particular case, this is a demand what equation, or a demand function, or a demand what model, which is written in an explicit form, because we can see clearly the various effects of the factors affecting demand, or the various effect of price on demand, effect of income on demand, effect of other prices on what? On demand. So here you can see clearly we have a negative relationship between price and demand, a positive relationship between what? Income and then what? Demand. And there is a negative relationship between price of what? The other good and demand. So a key question is, in this particular form, what type of good are we looking at? What type of good? What type of good is, let's say here we are looking at it, maybe what is the demand for good B. So what type of good? What type? So a key question is, what type of good? What type of good is A and B? Please note, this is demand for B, price of A. To be able to answer this, please note, to be able to answer this, you should look at the coefficient. Look at the coefficient or the sign of what? The sign of the price of the other goods. The price or sign of the other goods. Now, the price or the coefficient of the other good, the coefficient here, the coefficient of PA, that is the price of the other good, in this equation is here. So is it positive or negative? You realize that it is what? Negative. As you can see, you realize that it is negative. So PA is less than 0, which means that PA is negative. So which type of good shows a negative relationship? And by negative relationship, we are talking about an increase in price, okay? Price of what? Good A, actually leading to fall in the demand for which good? For good B here, leading to a fall in the demand for good B. So when there is an increase in price of a good, and that, what type of good that are we looking at it? What type of good? For these two goods, in this particular case, we are looking at it as what? A and B are what? Are complements. A and B are what? Are complements. Either they are complements, or some people will say complementary goods. So when there's an increase in the price of what? Torchlight or for battery, then the demand for torchlight will fall. Or if there is an increase in fuel price, maybe the demand for motorbikes will fall, or the demand for cars will fall. So this, if the sign is positive and negative, then which means the two goods in question we are looking at is what? Is a complement. However, if the sign is what? Positive. So in this particular case, maybe if we had this, where is it? Where is the equation? If here was what? Positive. If here was positive. In this particular case, the coefficient, if the coefficient of PA was what? Positive, which means we are talking about an increase in the what? An increase in the price. So if we have increase in the price of what? Good A. Remember in the equation, we are looking at it from this price of what? Good A increasing, affecting the demand for what? For good B. Price of good A increasing, affecting the demand for what? For good B. So in this particular case, you realize that what will be the true effects
There's
of
a
an
question.
increase? Okay, let me land. So if we have this, an increase in the price of a particular good, okay, will lead to an increase in the demand for the other good. An increase in the price of a good leading to increase in the demand for the other good. Okay, what type of good are we looking at it? We are looking at this good, these two goods, A and B, as what? As substitutes. We are looking at these two goods, A and B, as what? As substitutes. So please note, if you find a demand equation and you have this particular equation and the coefficient is either positive or negative, know that the type of good is complement if the coefficient is negative, and it is substitute if the coefficient is what? Positive. Alternatively, the sign of of Y, which is our income, should also tell us whether the good that we are looking at is a normal good or inferior good. It's a normal good or inferior good. In this particular case, if you look at the sign or income, or this, yes, let's say the sign of income in the equation, that's sign of Y. If Y is positive, which means that if the coefficient is positive, okay, if the sign is positive, let me just do it in full. Okay, let me read the question. What is the question? Muda, I can't see you. What is the question?
It was an oral question from one of the.
Oh yeah, please go ahead. Yes, please go ahead. Yes.
He says he's fine. Perhaps
Oh, he's fine.
Yeah.
Okay. So now,
explanation so far.
Sorry?
I think he said he's okay. He has gotten the answer from your explanations.
Okay. So if the sign of what? If the sign or coefficient of Y is positive, if the sign or the coefficient is Y is positive, which means that in this particular equation, we are looking at it as what type of good? Are we looking at good B? Based on, remember here is income. So if it is positive, which means that an increase in your income will lead to increase in the what? In the demand for this particular good that we are looking at. So what will make you to increase your demand for a particular good following an increase in what? Following an increase in this particular in your income. In that particular case, this particular good that we are looking at is a normal good. It's a normal good. It's a normal good. Okay. And if the coefficient or the sign is negative, okay, if the coefficient or the sign is negative, in this particular case, it means that once there is an increase in your income, you do what? You decrease the demand for that particular good. In this particular case, this particular good that we are looking at is an inferior good. It's an inferior good. It's an inferior good. So if I give you a question and I ask you, or a model, and I ask you what type of good is it, using the income, so it's either a normal good or an inferior good. But if I don't give you, if I give an equation and I ask you to also differentiate whether this particular good is a substitute or it is a complement, okay, you focus your attention on the coefficient of the what? of the price of other goods that we have. If it is positive, you can see it here. If it is positive, it is what? Substitute. And if it is negative, okay, if it's negative, it is what? It is complements. It's complements. Now, let's look at demand and supply determination. Or better still, let's just say equilibrium determination.
Have 10 minutes to your time.
10 minutes. Why? How many? 12:30.
12:30, they have
Oh.
to go on break and return.
Okay, no problem. Okay, so let's finish this one. Demand equilibrium determination. So let's say I give you you have something like demand, which is equal to, let's say, 10 minus 0.2 P, okay, as the demand equation. And you also have supply, okay, as, let's say, 5 plus 0.1 P. And I ask you to determine the equilibrium price and equilibrium quantity. So using equation, so this will be equation 1, here will be equation 2. And I ask you to, using equation 1 and 2, what is the equilibrium price, and then what? An equilibrium quantity. What is the equilibrium price and quantity? What is the equilibrium price and quantity using this? So the solution is basically, okay. So we have the solution. You will know that at equilibrium, so let's go to the next page and do the solution. So solution. At equilibrium, please note, at equilibrium, demand is equal to what? It's equal to supply. It's equal to supply. And what is demand? This is demand. And what is supply? This is supply. So in this particular case, we are going to equate the demand, which is what? 10 minus 0.2 P. Is that not it? Yes. It's equal to supply. And supply is what? 5 plus 0.1 P. And you know why demand is negative. The price is negative because of the law of demand. You know why this is negative? Because of the law of demand. And you know why this is positive? Because of the law of what? Supply. So even if I write something like this, Q is equal to 10 minus 0.2 P. And I also write Q is equal to 5 plus 0.1 P. And I ask you, which one is the supply equation and which one is the demand equation? You should be able to know using the sign of the price. So instead of giving you a hint, saying this is demand, this is supply, I can also just write it Q as what? As this equation 1, this one as this equation 2. And I'll ask you which one is the demand equation and which one is the price equation based on 1 and 2. You use the coefficient of the price. Here, the coefficient is what? It's negative. So there is a negative relationship between price and what? Quantity. And what relationship does it portray? That is the demand. In this particular case, there is a positive relationship between price and quantity. Which one is that? That is the supply. So even if I don't write, you should be able to know. Okay. So back to this. We'll use this to conclude. So this is our demand, and this is our supply. And we are saying that at equilibrium, demand is equal to what? Supply. So what we will have, the next step is the first step is for you to equate demand and supply. And the second one is to solve. The second step is to solve for what? For P, which is the price. By solving for P, which is the price, means what? Price the subject. So by making price the what? By making price the subject. From which particular equation? From this particular equation. So in this particular case, we can bring this 5 here and then send this one over. So we will have something like 10 we will have something like 10. Let me, so we'll have something like, as you can see, our 10 will be here. Okay. Let me use green so that we can see. So we will have 10 here. This 5 will come. So here will be minus because it's crossing. It's equal to, this one will stay, which is the 0.1 will stay. Here will cross. So because it's crossing, it will be plus. So plus 0.2p. So in this particular case, here will be what? 5 is equal to 0.3p. So we divide both sides by what? 0.3. Divide here by 0.3. In this particular case, when you do the division, what are you going to get? Here's 0.3. So this will cancel this, leaving us with what? I have 5 divided by 0.3. 5 divided by 0.3, which will be 16.67. So here will be 16.667 as what P, which means that our equilibrium, price, okay, therefore our equilibrium price will be what? Let's say 16.67 cedis. So what will be the equilibrium quantity? So for equilibrium quantity, you have to put the price, okay, put the price. And what is price? Price is 16.67. So you put price into either, please note, either the demand function or the supply function. Please note, it's either the demand or supply function, not the two, because they will give you the same answer. So let's just put this one in which equation? Let's say the demand equation. And what was the demand equation? We said it was D is equal to 10 minus what? 5, 0. What? 10 minus is here. 10 minus 0. What? This is the demand equation. 10 minus 0.2p. 10 minus 0.2p. But P is what? 16.67. So in this case, we are going to have D is equal to 10 minus this one, 16.67. 16.67. So in this particular case, we are going to have 0.2 times 16.67. So here will be 10 minus 3.334. So our demand would be what? 6.67. So this will be the demand. So this is the quantity demanded, and this will be the quantity, the price. So therefore, our equilibrium price, okay, would be what? 16.67, and our equilibrium quantity is what? 6.67. So when you transfer this diagrammatically, you will find this quantity price, okay? This will be the demand. Please note, this will be the demand. Remember, it is what? 10 minus 0.2 what? P. Here would be our what? Our supply, which is what? 5 plus 0.1 what? P. What we are seeing here is the equilibrium. When you trace it to hit the quantity axis, here will be 3 point what? 6.67. So here is 6.67. And then the equilibrium price will be what? 16.6 what? 16.67 cedis. So this is how you determine the, of course, here will be 0. So this is how you determine the equilibrium price and quantity using the equation. So later we will be building on this to make our progress. So you will definitely be meeting some of these things. So instead of giving you the charts, okay, or the demand or supply schedule, like the table, to find the equilibrium price, like here, like this one, to find the equilibrium, price and then the equilibrium quantity, we can express it mathematically as this. We can express it mathematically as this equation to be able to arrive at what the equilibrium price and equilibrium what quantity. So next week we will build from where we stopped, and we make progress. So we are getting into some technicalities. So you shouldn't be expecting a question like list the factors affecting demand or whatever, or determine the price or equilibrium quantity, and you get a table where you basically look at the various figures and find a place where they equate. No, you'll be given the models. You use the models to determine some of these two things. At the moment, we are using only one good case. Later, from next week of going, we will extend it to cover a situation where we have two goods. So you talk about good one, you talk about what good two. This is demand for good one, demand for good two. You have what supply for good one, and then supply for what for good two. So let's say later, once we are next week, so that you will just know if you have this as demand for good one, then you will also have what supply for what for good one. You will also have supply for good one, and then we will also have what demand for good two, and then we will also have what supply for what for good two. So this is, we are going to extend the analysis into multiple goods, or two goods case, where you need to determine the demand, the equilibrium price and quantity for good one, equilibrium price and quantity for good two, by equating and then working it out simultaneously, or using the matrix equation, which we will be doing next week. Any question from where we stopped before we end?
Someone has raised their hands online.
Yes, I can hear.
So,
yes, go ahead, Anthony.
You can unmute and then ask your question, and then.
Okay, so I wanted Doc to take us back to finding the equilibrium quantity.
Yes, here.
Yes.
So okay. So in finding the equilibrium quantity, remember you have established your equilibrium price already. Okay, and we said that at equilibrium, demand is the same thing as what supply at equilibrium. At equilibrium, demand is the same thing as what at supply, which means that at equilibrium price, let's say this is equilibrium price, the quantity demanded, okay, it will be the same as the quantity what supplied. Remember, we had the equilibrium here, with 16.67 as the what equilibrium price, and we inserted this particular price in which equation? Into demand equation, okay, to get the equilibrium quantity. Now, if you still as well want, you can put it into the supply equation. So let's say the supply equation we had was 5 plus 0.1 what T, if I remember correctly. Yes, so this was the supply equation. Well, no, this was the supply equation. 5 plus 0.1 P was the supply equation, as you can see it here. And we know for sure that our P that we found was 16.67. So using the supply equation to determine the equilibrium quantity, we will have 5 plus 0.1 P, and P is what? 16.67. So we are going to have 5 plus 16.67 times 0.1. So we are going to have 1.667. So here plus 5, you will have 6.667. which is the same thing as 6.67, which is the same thing as 6.67. So you realize that we have 6.67 here, and we also have the same 6.67 here. So you realize that at equilibrium, demand is the same thing as what supply. So not to waste your time, you don't have to put the figure for the equation for the price on the demand equation, work it out to get the quantity, and then do same by putting the equilibrium price on the supply equation to get the same answer. No. So you can just choose whether to put it in equation 1 as the demand equation, or you put it in equation 2 as a supply equation. In both cases, you will get the same answer. So when you plot, you will get the same set of plots as you can see here. So the quantity that we are having here is for both the demand and then the supply. This quantity that we are looking at is both for the demand and supply, as you can see, the same quantity, and then at this particular price. Is it much clearer? Okay. Any question?
Yes, so I think it's clear. Doc, right?
Yes. Is it
Sorry.
another hand? Yes, I'm done. Yes, please go ahead.
Yes. Can you highlight where you use the coefficient to identify the type of product? Just a
Yes,
quick one.
here.
on that.
The
Thank you.
coefficient to identify the type of what? Good.
Product.
The type of good, right?
The type of good.
The type of good. Okay, so you are talking about this equation here.
Yes.
Good.
Yes.
So in this particular case, you will realize that this is a demand curve, okay, in an explicit form. So we have here as the price of the good. We have here as what? Income. We have here as the price of other goods, okay? Now, the type of good one, you may be looking at substitute or complement. And once you are talking about substitute of complement, you are talking about what? Prices of other goods, okay? Prices of other goods. So in the equation, we will have to define what PX is. We will have to also define what Y is. We have to also define what PA is. In this particular case, PX is the price of that particular good in question. And we said we are looking at which good? Good D. It could also be good 1. And we are looking at Y as the income, how much your income affects your demand for this particular good. We are also looking at this as a factor affecting what? Demand for good B, which are we looking at? Price of the other commodities. Now, if we have this as the coefficient, which is positive, you will see that an increase in here, of the other goods, okay, leading to an increase in the demand for the other good. Remember, the coefficient is positive, which means if there is an increase in price, this demand will also what? Increase. So if there is an increase in the price of a particular good, and that increase in the price of that particular good will lead to increase in the demand for the other good. What type of good is it? Remember, we are looking at two goods, substitutes or complements. So what will make you to buy more of a particular good if the price of one other good has increased? It's because what substitutes when they serve the same purpose. Because when the price of Milo increases, you leave Milo and go and buy Bonvita, which means the demand for Bonvita will increase. Not because the price for Bonvita has reduced. It's because the price of what? Milo has increased. So in this particular case, because Milo and Bonvita serve the same purpose, okay? Once there is an increase in the price of Milo, it will lead to an increase in the demand for Bonvita. And in that case, the true goods are substitutes. In that case, the true goods are substitutes. However, if here was negative, let me cancel this one. However, if here was negative, in this particular case, you are seeing it from which particular perspective? Once there is an increase in the price of a particular good. Because of this negative sign, it means that this demand will what? Will fall. It means this will lead to decrease in the demand, decrease in the demand. So what will make demand for a particular good to fall? Not because its price has increased, but because the price of one other good somewhere has increased. It's because these particular goods are what? Are complements. They are jointly what? Demanded, or they are jointly consumed. Because, for instance, torchlight and then what? A battery and then what? Torchlight. When there is an increase in the price of what? Torchlight, a battery, what will happen to demand for torchlight? Demand for torchlight will fall because you would have been incurring higher, buying the torchlight, buying the, battery at a higher price if you go into buy what? Torchlight, because you cannot use the torchlight without what? A battery. So in this particular case, the two are negatively related, which means the coefficient of the prices of other goods in the equation is negative if the two goods are what? Complements. Otherwise, the two goods are what? Are substitutes. Okay. Now, using the income will also tell you whether the good that you are looking at is either inferior good or a normal good. That is using the income to make a decision. Now, if income, okay, here the coefficient here is what? Is positive, which means that an increase in your income will lead to an increase in the demand for this particular good. You can see from the coefficient here, which is positive, which means that as your income is increasing, you buy more of that particular good. As your income is also falling, you buy less of that particular good. What type of good are we looking at? We are looking at which type of good. The good is a normal good. So here, if the coefficient is positive, the good is a what? A normal good. However, if the coefficient is negative, okay, which means that that's the coefficient of income. The coefficient of income. If it is negative, it means that an increase in what? In your income will lead to decrease in demand for this particular good that we are looking at. Or once you have lower income, you tend to buy more of that particular goods because the relationship is what? Is negative, because the relationship is negative. In this particular case, you only consume more of that particular good when your income is what? Low. When you have low income, you consume more. But when you begin to get more money, you don't consume that particular good. It means that that particular good that you are looking at is an inferior good. It's an inferior good. It's an inferior good. And it is inferior good if the coefficient, as you can see, this is going up and this is coming down. If the coefficient of what? Of income, if the coefficient of what? Of income is what? Is negative. If the coefficient of income is negative, then it means it's an inferior good. But here, if the coefficient is what? Is positive, it means it is a what? A normal good. So from the income side, we are talking about inferior good or normal good. And from the price side, we are talking about what? Complements or what? Or substitutes. So you should know the relationship. I hope this is clear.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Any question?
No question. No question.
Okay, so I will send you the notes. Let me
You can save
yes.
it, right?
Yes. So I'm saving it as PDF. So I would send it to you. So this will be lecture 2. So this is lecture 2.
Oh, what you has worked.
Lecture 2.
So that you can compare.
Yes, so I'm going to send you this lecture. Okay. So I will send you the notes so that you can be looking at. So I'll send it on. Whilst Muda will share the video with you, I will share the notes. All these notes will be shared with you, and this is what we'll be doing. Okay.
Depend on your. That will depend on your recording.
Okay. No problem.
Yes, at some points we had a little network challenge.
Yes, I think I also had a little network challenge, but I recorded almost 99%. So I'll share with you. Even this in few minutes time. Okay, thank you. All the best. Yeah.
Thank you too, Doc.
So let me stop sharing.
Doc, we can't see you.
Oh, you want to see me? Okay, let me.
Let's see.
Okay, let me stop.